As a hack reviewer and world-renowned hypocrite, I feel like the best way to start this video is by complaining about something I do all the time. I like to give out scores at the end of reviews mainly as a summary, as if I end the video talking about the negative aspects of the game, it's easy to forget the positives I brought up earlier and think I like the game less than I do. The problem with review scores though is that people use it to summarize too much. Like, I gave Armored Core 6 a 6.5 out of 10 and Batman Arkham Knight an 8.5. All that tells you is that I like Arkham Knight more, but it doesn't tell you that I prefer the combat loop of Armored Core. This is an especially big problem for sites like IGN where you don't know the preferences and biases of the reviewer because you don't even know who they are. Another problem IGN and honestly the American education system has spun is that now a lot of people think that anything below a 7 is a bad game when, on my scale, anything above 5 is at least somewhat good. All of this is to say that Metal Gear Solid 4 is one of the most complicated video games I have ever played, and just throwing out a number doesn't nearly encapsulate how I feel about it. So even though this is applicable to all my reviews, I am begging you, if there was ever a time to listen to what I'm saying instead of just the number, it is now. So please keep that in mind as we get into the spoiler review of Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. There will also be major spoilers for God of War Ragnarok, Red Dead Redemption 2 towards the end, as well as the entire Metal Gear series up to this point. To start off, the first two things you'll notice about Guns of the Patriots is that it is one Kojima-ass game and one PS3-ass game, which both can be to a fault at times. Let's be real, it wouldn't be a standard Kojima game if it didn't turn the whole medium of video games on its head, and this game does that in spades. Our whole lives, we've been conditioned by Big Bethesda and Todd Coward, as I like to call him, to believe one and one thing only, and that's that war. War never changes. Then you pop in the Metal Gear 4 disc, and what's the first thing Snake says?
War has changed.
Who do I believe? He changed war. You can't change war! And alongside that complete bombshell is other Kojima-isms that fans of the series will recognize, like breaking the fourth wall and referencing older games to make the exposition more interesting, blatantly addressing the hardware updates with the disc switching, and Mantis being pissed about the internal hard drive, and how the weird-ass game show at the start sets up the Outer Heaven society that the Patriots set up, where the war economy is the most pivotal aspect of society. And Kojima has great ideas with where to take this world, like how nanomachines effectively make soldiers just donated bodies, moving, thinking, and feeling the way the system wants them to. Unfortunately though, when Kojima's highs get cranked up to 11, it also proportionally cranks up his lows, like Vamp's dick knife, graduating from piss effects to shit effects, and the B&B's bodysuits being so skin tight that they're... I don't know how to say this in a way that won't get me a slap on the wrist from YouTube. Their suits are so skin tight that they reveal a little too much detail. And for those that don't know, I was pretty sick for a while and basically had the flu for a whole month, to the point that it was hard to make videos or even just play video games. So this isn't a problem most people will have, but those long-ass cutscenes that Kojima loves really suck when you're dry heaving. And speaking of, this game looks like someone just puked pure stomach bile all over the screen. It's not as visually violating as Breaking Bad's Mexico filter, but this game is so fucking ugly, and the yellow and brown color scheme are the biggest reason why. This game is great graphically, but the color palettes they use and the settings where this game takes place make me feel like I'm playing Resident Evil 5 or Call of Duty 4. I desperately want a Master Collection 2 with this game included, but this game is the epitome of what a PS3 game looks like and might look out of place on modern consoles. And even if it does make the game look butt ugly, I am glad the developers chose the set pieces they did. Sneaking your way through an active battlefield is a fantastic idea alone, but the fact that you're dodging a hailstorm of bullets as a third party trying to remain undetected, and have the ability to briefly help either side to create a new path forward is genius. It does get a bit finicky in this section where you're trying to climb up this hill, as the game is really choosy with which ledges you can and can't climb up, but once you get the enemy's movement patterns memorized, you should make it through just fine. And don't even get me started on returning to Shadow Moses. It's so eerie being back with how quiet and empty it is, and while I do wish this was the final location of the story, it is so much fun to play through, especially with the final big boss fight of the area. Speaking of, it's not the biggest deal, and it does have its pros like being able to go back to Shadow Moses Island, but it is a bit odd that this game isn't based in one continuous area or base like the last 3 games. But I do have to say that this game is the turning point in the series that I've been waiting for. Metal Gear, Metal Gear Solid, and Metal Gear Solid 3 were all super innovative and pushed their hardware just enough to wow me. It really felt like in these games, Konami had a proper understanding of what they could and couldn't do. Metal Gear 1 is a good example, as the controls are very limited and there's really not much you can do, but the systems are simple enough for the gameplay to be straightforward yet clever. If a guard or camera isn't looking in my direction, or they don't see the cardboard box moving, I'm good. Every even-numbered game, though, just pushes it way too far, man. Metal Gear 2 was insufferable. I'm playing a game that came out on the MSX2, dude. I got guards spotting me from off-screen and chasing me until I give up. It is way too punishing for a game that unclear. I can't win a game I don't know the rules of. Metal Gear Solid 2 had the same problem, but to a lesser extent. Best example I can think of off the top of my head was when I needed to force a soldier in the big shell to do a retinal scan to open a door. So I tried 3 different logical solutions, none of which worked, because the real solution was to hold up the soldier with my gun in front of the door and then holster my weapon, which triggered the cutscene. The reason that isn't logical to me is because the game taught me that if I aim my gun at an enemy from behind, they'll know I'm there, but won't alert the others because they're being held at gunpoint. So it's easy to assume that if I holster my gun, the one thing keeping them from attacking me and telling the others, my ass is grass. The whole point of this long-ass rant is to say that if the pattern follows, Metal Gear Solid 4 should be a rough transition that bites off more than it can chew, but that's only partially right. Well, it does have some issues like how CQC is somehow trickier than the last game, how the psych meter is almost completely useless and just breaks up cutscenes with how goofy it is, and how fighting through Outer Haven stealthily seems genuinely impossible with the geckos at the end. This is where the series starts to get modernized. It is such a smoother transition between modern shooters to MGS4 than to all the others so far. And that's mainly due to accurate third-person aiming, weapon unlocks and customization, the Octo suit which brings back the camo mechanic from 3 without constantly having to go into a sub-menu, and what I think was the biggest omission from Snake Eater, crouching. You have no idea how elated I was that we finally got to crouch in the most successful stealth franchise. No amount of crouching can redeem that bullshit where you track Naomi or that fuck-ass trailing mission, though. Don't even try to act like that shit's good, bro. I swear, I'd rather drag Eva through the jungle again. Never mind, fuck you. What's really unfortunate about this game, though, is that it has some of the best and worst fights in this entire series. The B&Bs are essentially newer models of the Foxhound Splinter Cell group that took over Shadow Moses, and while they do manage to be their own thing while being based on the old group, they have the exact same problem as the old group, where once you kill them, you get their whole villainous backstory about how they were raised by ocelots and their parents didn't show up to their own birth. Except this time, it is so much worse because you hear it from Drebin instead of the actual character you just killed. And that's not me hating on Drebin, I love that guy. It's just way less interesting when you don't hear it from them. Especially because once you finally know something interesting about their character, you know you'll never see them again. At least Psycho Mantis helped you out after his fight, and I guess that leads me into Screaming Mantis. This is the worst boss fight in the series so far by a country mile. You don't do shit! It goes beyond being a callback to the original Mantis fight and just duplicates it. Once again, the Mantis character is controlling Meryl and is reading your inputs, making it nearly impossible to hit them. So you have to think about how their powers work and come up with an exploit, that being removing your nanomachines in this case, and then you can finally hit them. But this time, instead of whittling down a health bar while keeping Meryl safe and dodging flying pieces of furniture, you shoot one of her dolls, pick it up, and shake it. That is the entirety of her boss fight. In all honesty, it did take me a while to figure out, but that's because I have a cinder block in my head. I'm dumb. Once I figured out what to do, I had the exact same experience as any person on the planet with an IQ above 25, and the fight was over in 30 seconds. All this fight does is remind you of a better boss fight and make you think, damn, I wish I was playing Metal Gear Solid 1. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they blue ball you by shoving needless fan service in your face and make you think there's a round 2 where you fight Psycho Mantis again. But no, fuck you, that's it. They don't even explain his being there in an interesting way. It's not even really him. He just got Johnny silver-handed and became part of her consciousness. Thankfully though, the rest of the B&B fights aren't nearly as rough as that one. Crying Wolf managed to successfully call back to the first game in a tasteful way by taking place in the same field Sniper Wolf died, and her fight is a fun twist on the original, where you need to essentially have a sniper battle with the PMC goobers while blasting rockets at her mech. Raging Ravens was, oddly enough, also similar to Sniper Wolves, where you need to use your stealth and your octo camo to take out an explosive opponent, which was fun, and I was very interested to see what the Laughing Octopus fight would be like since Decoy didn't have one. I gotta say, it was super cool looking through the house to find her when she's camouflaged, especially with how it gets harder and harder to spot her, but that does get dragged down by how easy it is to cheese the fight. I literally just used the same strategy from when I was 6 and my dad had too much to drink, where I hid under the bed and just waited out the attacks. That strategy did make the fight less fun, so I guess guess that is on me, but I would have preferred if that shortcut wasn't an option in the first place. And since we got the old games and fan service on the brain, let's talk about two of the best boss fights I've played in a long time. If you haven't played this game before, you have no clue how satisfying it was when this game turned into Armored Core, and I got to pilot the thing I'd been destroying for 5 games now. And the other boss that blew my tits off was fighting Liquid Ocelot. As you'll see in the story section, this entry in the Metal Gear Solid series only enhances what came before, shown in how they use music and health bars from the old games. Now, on the one hand, that is obviously fan service. On the other, this sequence alone saved me thousands of dollars in Viagra, so I'll let it slide. And while I am upset the series didn't start and end at Shadow Moses Island, I'm glad the decade-long fight against Liquid Ocelot starts and ends in hand-to-hand combat. What really blows about the boss fights, though, is how the game runs when you play them. This game cannot load shit. I understand that this game was technically innovative at the time and really pushed the hardware of the PlayStation 3, but I really wish there was a way you could run this game smoothly in 2025. It's not just the frame rate either, there's some really weird issues with this game. Like how hair textures have this area around them that isn't affected by the out of focus effect, and how I downloaded the game overnight, booted it up the next morning, and had to wait 15 fucking minutes for the game to install! I have never seen this in a game. Why didn't it just download? I'm so tired of this shit.
Kept you waiting, huh?
Never mind, I'm good. But one really weird issue is that the sound effects in this game are amazing, especially the sound of Liquid and Solid's punches in the finale, but they're too quiet and the audio mixing is too fucked up, so they have no impact when Raiden is getting tortured by Vamp. Oh yeah, speaking of, Raiden's back. What the fuck ever. I did not find Raiden remotely interesting back in Sons of Liberty, but at least in this game, he has an excuse to be bland since he's taken over the role in the story of Gray Fox. He has no character arc, and he's only cooler because he's a cyborg now. But we don't know how he got this way, and also, is he cooler now? Because I cannot defend this. It is interesting that he's going down the same path Gray Fox did, and mirrors Snake being unable to leave the battlefield in a more extreme way, but he's just so bland in his dialogue. And I despise where his relationship with Rose goes. The whole time, Rose was only pretending to be married to Campbell, which further drove the wedge between him and Meryl, but it was only as a way to protect her. Because if there was even a small chance that she was with Raiden at all, she'd be too close to the situation and unsafe. But Campbell is literally picking up and debriefing Snake this entire game and is just as, if not more, involved than Raiden. What's the difference? And even though she hates Rose, Meryl is involved in a way so important that it transcends logic, and I'd imagine Rose still wouldn't be safe as her mother-in-law, which she is, but only according to those who think she's married to Campbell. So everyone on the planet. And their kid is another monkey wrench thrown into the story. It is a good follow-up because she said she was pregnant at the end of 2, even though I'm pretty sure that was the AI. But in this game, she claims it was a miscarriage. So much is set up from the beginning. Things didn't go perfectly. She had a miscarriage, their relationship fell apart, and now we get to see them try and make the best out of their circumstances and where they ended up. But I hate that all of that isn't just thrown away, but completely undone, all for the sake of a happy ending, especially with a couple as lame as these two. I'm not bought into them ending up together when her whole life with him was a lie orchestrated by the villains of this game and the Sons of Liberty. If you want them to get back together at the end of this game, fine, that's great. But don't do it by tossing out everything that was set up before in one cutscene. And Raiden and Rose's inconsistencies sort of drag a few other characters down with them. Like, I played these games back to back, one almost immediately after the other, only taking time to write these scripts. I could not binge this series any harder if I wanted to. And there are still some details I don't remember from the game I played like 2 weeks ago. Like, even though they're caught up in some stupid character conflicts, I am very glad Meryl and Campbell are back. But I don't remember shit about them from Metal Gear Solid 1. They're pissed at each other because of some detail that went down on Shadow Moses, and also because Campbell is actually her biological father, and when I heard that, I had to say, if you say so, Kojima. Like, at the time I was writing this script, I had played that game 2 weeks ago, and that's still news to me. I do believe that those conflicts were set up in the first game, but I'm not 100% confident given how inconsistent Rose and Raiden are. Drebin is an interesting character, Kari Payton is a great actor, and I'm really glad he's here as the gameplay system he provides is really cool, but he's not really crucial to the story, except for some twists at the end that we'll talk about later and don't fully understand. But I am so fucking glad that my 2 goats are back, and so pissed off that my 3rd goat is back, which, I don't even have the mental bandwidth to talk about without having an aneurysm, so for now, we'll talk about Solid Snake and Otacon. These two guys are so cool and so bad with kids. I really like seeing Olga's daughter Sunny, and she's a great addition to the crew in the Nomad, but these are some of the most awkward conversations I have ever seen. People do not speak like this, Kojima. They don't plan weddings as they're getting riddled with bullets. And while I do love Otacon and Snake, they're not excluded from this issue. Snake, the guy who prevented several nukes from dropping, stopped his evil twin brother, along with his terrorist allies, spent years on his own with Hal taking out and disabling Metal Gears across the globe, and prevented Manhattan from being annexed from the United States and turned into outer heaven, does not believe that he's a hero, and will remind you of that every 5 minutes. At least he sounds badass saying it though, and the performance is incredible, especially with his gruff, older voice. Snake coming to terms with his death, we'll get back to that, is really interesting to see play out, and listen, it is very narratively satisfying to finally see Solid Snake leave the battlefield, especially since he's willing to, but doesn't want to make the sacrifice. But do you know what's better than Snake dying? Otacon living, baby. That is my boy. His dialogue can be rough at times, like how the tension of the robots about to destroy the USS Missouri is completely destroyed by his corny ass saying, "We did it," or how Naomi's death is undercut emotionally because she's essentially talking to BD-1 from Jedi Fallen Order. But I do really like him, and his goofy robot reminds me of Herbie from the Fantastic Four. But I feel like they missed a big opportunity to have Otacon be the one to finish off Vamp. It would have been so cool to see him avenge his sister, especially since this would be his first kill and he's never in the field, and it would be like how Sindri is the one to actually kill Odin in God of War Ragnarok.
But Otacon not killing Vamp isn't the only opportunity that this game missed, and it definitely isn't its only misstep. This is the most mixed I've ever been on a video game story to a frustrating degree, because it makes it so I can't just recommend it or not. This story is the reason the review score cannot summarize my thoughts adequately, because it has some of my favorite story moments across the entire history of gaming, and some of my least favorite ever. I finally understand that people are saying lolly lay low because the nanomachines won't allow people to say the word Patriots. Which, it is satisfying to get an answer, but it's inconsistent because Snake says Patriots all the time, and people are going to be confused as fuck as to why they physically can't say the word Patriots, which would only further confusion and suspicion. We finally learned why Foxhound didn't kill Snake at the end of Metal Gear Solid 1, but it turns out to be a reason as boring as, yeah, even though you're almost completely identical to Liquid genetically, it wasn't programmed to kill you. And then they compound it with more Foxhound bullshit that super pisses me off. And we figure out that Snake is aging rapidly because he was genetically designed to do so, like the clones from Star Wars, which I do love, but it's completely independent of the Fox die in his system and the fact that he's about to become a bioweapon of mass murder. Oh, and also, in a scene that I literally don't remember in the slightest, to the point that I'm not even entirely sure it happened in the first place, Snake was injected with an anti-Fox die that neutralized the old Fox die and was meant to kill someone else who... Just wait a moment and we'll get to it. Yes, there is a happy ending, which is nice, but only if it's earned, not if you throw out thousands of plot twists that are impossible to see coming, like Rat Patrol and Drebin being sent by the Patriots to help Snake destroy the Patriots! And yeah, I know they're an AI, which is done in a cool way, even though I'm so sick of AI villains in 2024. And they're based on an algorithm that repeats the same thing over and over, but it's hard to believe that an intricate system of AIs capable of running the United States isn't smart enough to not sabotage itself. Especially in a universe where technology is so advanced that there are bipedal tanks that can launch nuclear missiles to anywhere on Earth, from anywhere on Earth, without setting off any form of radar, which, by the way, were created in 1995. And yeah, I know the AI's code has to be old considering who made it, but again, the AI is so advanced that you'd think it'd be capable of upgrading itself. I'm really glad they threw out the twist at the end of 2 that the Patriots had been dead for years, but they do it in one line of dialogue by having Snake say, "Oh yeah, that info was a crock of bullshit." And I fucking despise what they did with Ocelot. Not only is Liquid killed by Fox die again, even after they say, "No, we're not doing that again, that was just a joke," not only does he pull the trump card at the end of, "Oh, I actually wanted this to happen," but they did what I wanted and fucked it up anyway. When playing Metal Gear Solid 2, and seeing Revolver turn into Liquid Snake because he had his hand replace the one Gray Fox cut off, I said, okay, there is exactly one single way they can pull this off and not have it be the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and that's nanomachines. If nanomachines course through your blood, it would make sense that some of Liquid's nanomachines were in his hand when it was removed, and then attacked and overwrote Ocelot's nanomachines in his body, essentially like what Johnny Silverhand is doing to V. But not only do they do that, they add on to it by saying Revolver Ocelot decided to continue his mission under Solidus and Liquid and Big Boss to destroy the Patriots by undergoing severe psychiatric mental training and using nanomachines to convince himself that he actually is Liquid Snake in Revolver Ocelot's body out of loyalty to the Big Boss. What really irks me is that they mentioned at some point in Sons of Liberty, I think, that like Arasaka with Silverhand, they're able to digitalize someone's consciousness and brain, but this isn't that. This isn't Liquid Snake at all. This is a guy who has convinced himself and everyone else that he is Liquid, but is actually just subconsciously pretending to be him. So since there is no true trace of Liquid Snake at all, that means that every interaction between Liquid Ocelot and Old Snake is completely meaningless because Snake is not talking to his brother. Snake is not fighting his brother. He's fighting a guy that he's only truly interacted with a grand total of 2 times at Shadow Moses Island a decade ago. Revolver Ocelot was such a badass character, even when he had a grand total of 4 polygons. And they decided, hey, you will never see him talk to Solid Snake ever again. Fuck, I'm getting heated. Okay, I need to calm down. Let me get to my favorite thing a video game has ever done. The first 3 Metal Gear Solid games all feel very different. Yes, they're sequels and prequels, but they all feel like their own game and not really an extension of the last. Yeah, Solid is in 2, but that's Raiden's game, and we have a whole new villain with the Colonel actually being the Patriots AI, and it doesn't really progress Solid Snake's story. Yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3 is significant to the other games, but only because Naked Snake is their father. It makes its own mark in its gameplay, setting, and establishing what came before, but not what caused the other games. And I don't think I need to explain how these 3 are different than Metal Gear 1 and 2. All 5 of these games in the series are connected, but don't feel like long DLCs of the last game like some current sequels do in terms of plot. Which, by the way, I don't really think is a bad thing. But what Metal Gear Solid 4 does that blew my fucking gourd is serve as a sequel to all 5 of those games. It's a sequel to 2 in the traditional sense, as it picks up where that game left off with its villains and story. It's a sequel to 1 because this is the next time we truly see Solid Snake evolve as a character and progress through his arc. And it's very dependent on characters we haven't seen since MGS1, like Meryl, Mei Ling, Naomi, and technically Johnny. And this game is a sequel to Snake Eater by completely recontextualizing everything that game is. It's not just important because you're playing as the father of the snakes. It's important because you're playing as the villains. Naked Snake, Major Zero, Paramedic, Sigint Eva, and Revolver Ocelot are the Patriots. Virtuous Mission and Operation Snake Eater are what caused this whole story in the first place, as not only are they the Patriots, but they caused this world they're living in by trying to realize the boss's dream of a world unified, a world known as Outer Heaven. But Zero created the AIs to be the Patriots because he and Big Boss had very different interpretations of what Outer Heaven is and what the boss wanted, and they drifted into becoming enemies, with the last straw being Zero replicating their symbol of the Ultimate Soldier under the Les Infanterie project, the same project that created Solid Snake. And like Big Boss, Solid Snake follows the cause of the boss of not being loyal to a flag, but to a mission, which we see him do and see set up in this game and Sons of Liberty as he prevents the creation of Metal Gears across the globe on his own command. Not only that, but we see why the DARPA chief's blood was targeted by Foxhound in MGS1 because he is Sigint the Patriot, but we also find out that the person Big Boss fell in love with in 3 carried out the birth of Solid and Liquid Snake. And since Big Boss defected from the United States in Foxhound because of how corrupt it was under Zero, that completely recontextualizes both Metal Gear 1 and 2 by showing us that not only was Big Boss trying to do the right thing in those games, but as a soldier carrying out the will of Foxhound and destroying a civilization free from the Patriots, Solid Snake is the villain in those games. And as a Patriot and someone with a deep respect for Big Boss, in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, Revolver Ocelot was working with Solidus to take down Zero's Patriot system out of loyalty to the Big Boss. Holy shit. What a fantastic story and an immaculate finale to all the games that came in this series before. What the fuck? Why? Why would you do this, Kojima? It was over! You slam dunked that shit and this is how you kept it off? I mean, there is a very low but non-0% chance that this is actually cool as fuck, so let's hear it out. To be fair, I didn't see this coming. But I did have my suspicions that Big Boss's remains weren't actually his, and the reason why is you have to check the eyes. Big Boss had his right eye shot out, and this body is missing its left. And there are only 2 snakes in this series that wear an eye patch on the left side, Solid and Solidus. Now, I know this body isn't Solid Snake's because he actually isn't missing an eye. The eye patch is actually a gadget he uses in combat, and he's also right in fucking front of me, which leaves Solidus. Now, I figured this body has to be his until the body was destroyed, credits rolled, and it was never brought up again. So I figured, damn, Kojima's getting confused in his old age. He probably doesn't even remember that Glup Shido is supposed to be a light blue instead of the remake where he's a light teal. But then, in a post-credit scene, Solid Snake's plot armor disables the pistol he's using to blow his brains out, and Big Boss shows up to the cemetery. It turns out that Big Boss actually did look like this for a while after the explosion in Zanzibar Land, but at some point, his original Patriot buddies helped him out and essentially gave him all his missing parts from the remains of Solidus. He then says, this geezer is Major Zero, and basically we have to kill him because war starts from 0 and turns to 1, then to 10 and escalates, and then he offs him. And then, because they say so, Big Boss gets offed, and actually the whole time, the anti-Fox die that destroyed Solid's Fox die was also normal Fox die in the sense that it was designed to kill Big Boss. I'm gonna say it, Solid Snake should have killed himself. Don't get me wrong, I like what Big Boss says about Zero, and how he dies at his grave next to his mom, and how Big Boss's death marks the long-awaited end of the conflict he started, but this whole cutscene is completely unnecessary. They brought back Big Boss just to kill him immediately, and it completely throws away the character arc of Snake coming to terms with his death. That whole moment after he goes through the big microwave where he's told he's earned his rest is now meaningless. He should have died. They told us this whole game he was going to die. He has earned his rest, even if he'll never admit it, and he should finally be able to leave the battlefield like Gray Fox wanted for both of them. But no. Now we have the exact same unsatisfying ending as Metal Gear Solid 1, where Snake is gonna die, he has no clue how much longer he has, but it doesn't matter how long as he spends it being happy. Fuck off. Imagine how stupid it would be if it turned out that the whole time, Arthur Morgan had the cure to tuberculosis in his satchel that was slowly healing him and he lived at the end. Listen, I can understand how people love this game. IGN gave it a 10 out of 10, and even though they usually get on my nerves a bit because the lowest score they can give a game is a 7, but they also somehow underrate a lot of games, I understand how this game would be a 10 out of 10 for someone. It does so much excellently, but it does just as much horribly in my opinion. I wasn't lying when I said that it being a sequel to every other game in this series up to that point is one of, if not my favorite thing a video game has ever done. But just as it accentuates some plot lines, it completely ruins others. So even though I just said around 6,000 words in this video justifying why I feel this way, I still feel off saying that this is my least favorite Metal Gear Solid game I've played, and that I believe it is a 6.5 out of 10, even though it's true. I absolutely feel that way, but there's so much more that comes with that ranking and that score, and I just want to give this game the credit it deserves. But if there's anything this game and this whole series has taught me, it's that no matter how much longer you have left, live life to the fullest. And I plan on heeding that advice. Because I just gave a Kojima game a 6.5 out of 10, and I know some super fans out there are gonna make sure I do not have long left.